Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. My parents are divorced and have been for almost 7 years now. They split due to Dad not being home for his kids at all. He's self-employed and chooses his own hours to work. However, he'd work every day of the week, waking up at 10 after me and my sisters went to school and getting home at 8 or 9 p.m. when we were already preparing for bed. So when I say my mom was a single parent despite being married, I mean it. She's my idol and I look up to her so much. Anyway, after the divorce, the court arranged that there would be equal custody over us 3 kids. We would stay with Mom for 1 week, then Dad the next, and so on. But it wasn't true equal custody. Due to the hours my dad chose to work, us kids had to walk back to Mom's new flat, where we would be fed, she'd help us with homework, etc. Then, at 9 p.m., Dad would come collect us and we'd go straight back to his house to sleep. Weekends would just be us kids in his house alone all day while he worked. But at night, that was when it got worse. See, my dad is incredibly insecure. As such, he insisted I leave my phone downstairs to charge on the nights, so that you aren't on it all hours of the night. He promised me he wouldn't go through it, as he A had no right to, and B Mum paid for the phone anyway. But that very first night, I woke up suddenly at 3 a.m. to my bedroom door being actually kicked inwards, and my dad screaming at me, my phone in his hand. Apparently he wasn't happy that I had been messaging my friend about the sleeping situation. He then told me he didn't want me in his sight. I'd like to say this is where the story ends, but I'm still typing. This would happen every other night when I would sleep at his house, and my sisters were traumatized by the yelling and screaming they would hear each night he decided to look at my phone. Each morning my phone would be unlocked. With gallery, messages, contacts, and WhatsApp open, it became the norm for me to delete message threads and just tell him nobody spoke to me. But that instead aroused his suspicion that I was lying to him. I couldn't change my phone's PIN because he'd ask for it in case of emergencies. It eventually drew to the point where after years of abuse, I had enough. In January 2020, I gave up on it all and decided to not continue living. I was caught by the police, arrested and taken to a ward where the first person I saw was my dear sweet mum, who told me that I didn't have to live with my dad anymore. Both the lowest and highest point in my life. Fast forward to a few months ago, my younger sister decided she wants to live with Mum permanently like I do. Dad doesn't take this news lightly. He insists on a friendly talk with me and my sister in a public park, so we can arrange what she wants. Surprise, surprise, I was invited for alternate reasons. Dad begins yelling at me about how bad of a son I've been to him, as a dad that's done nothing but his absolute best to raise me. So I remind him of the abuse. It's how my dad raised me. There's nothing wrong with bollocking every now and then. I stand up for myself this time. I yell back at him about how he dares sit there and demand respect and appreciation for nothing but allowing your children to sleep in your house and traumatizing your son because you feel insecure. He demands I respect him, and I tell him I never have. That breaks him. He begins crying about how he's felt and how he's been contemplating not continuing living. I begin to soften, but as I do, he says, and it's all because of how you kids have treated me. I tell him he's a scumbag and a jerk for trying to guilt-trip his kids by threatening such an act. That my sister won't be staying with him, and we leave. When he comes to pick up our youngest sister, he doesn't speak to us, and he doesn't acknowledge we exist. My sister and I are finally safe. Edit. For those of you that asked, my youngest sister still goes to my dad's house regularly, and is the golden child of the bunch. She looks the most like him, and is the most impressionable. Regarding how she's treated, we ask her every time she comes home from school how it was at her dad's house, and thankfully nothing has happened. She isn't shaky or hesitant in her responses, and she seems to genuinely enjoy being there, just as much as she enjoys living here. In terms of child support and the legal side of things, my mum took him to court a few weeks ago, because he hadn't been paying any of the money he owed for both my sisters. I'm 18, legally exempt. However, It's been discovered he's been committing tax fraud for years due to his job being cash in hand. So he's on his way to staying behind bars for no less than a couple of years. I was in the USAF at the time of this, and was working IT and an information manager, IM, for a maintenance squadron. There were 6 other IMs who could have done IT, as it was a core task of our career field. None of them wanted to, and I didn't want to do paperwork. So it was a good fit. I ended up snowballing tasks, and was soon in charge of doing all the AV stuff for the squadron. Christmas slides, Gyaoil will make them. Fundraiser, Gyaoil will handle it. I even ended up with a base job where I had to go to a specific location during crisis, tornadoes, if there was a base attack, etc., to do backroom IM stuff for all the big wigs of the base. I hated it. I didn't see the point of IMs there. I did the job without complaint though. It was my job. The squadron was the second largest account on the base, 650 pieces of equipment and over 200 personnel spread over multiple hangars. I was also the only IT person with a line badge, so I was allowed to freely go on the flight line without an escort. 3 of our work section were on the flight line and required the badge or an escort to get to. For some reason I rub shitty leadership the wrong way. I generally don't take crap. If something is wrong, I speak up. I don't ask kiss because I don't do the politics crap. It's a job. I do my job. Everyone should just care about their job. Politics be damned. Everyone in the squadron loved me, and some places would call me Bill Gates. I was there when they called. If I couldn't fix the problem in 10 to 15 minutes, I would swap the bad equipment out. I always brought some with me. This leadership was shitty. Our first SGT was someone we call retired on active duty, road sergeant. They don't give a fuck. They're in a spot that they're comfortable in and don't care about getting the next rank or know they've kissed enough ass to skate by. For example, I'm fixing her laptop on a Friday morning. I'm bored. I don't really have anything to do for the day. Bitch, you're a first SGT, your job is to gauge squadron morale. Know what the shops are up to. You always have something to do. Go talk to people because I can tell you morale sucks ass right now. At one point they decided it was time to catch me red-handed being lazy. The first SGT came in and told all 7 of us that we're going to track the jobs we do for the week. We're going to do this from here on out, and it was directed by the group commander, Flight Squadron Group Wing, the base greater than command AF wide. Okay, we doubt that, but we'll do it. I made an Excel sheet for us all to share and write down our jobs. Each information manager had their own tab and columns to fill in the job. The date, the time they started it, the time they finished it. The sheet would automatically count the jobs, spit out how long it took to complete a job and give an average time it takes to complete them. It took me all of 5 minutes to throw together. That week was a normal week for me. I'd get various calls. My account is locked out because I forgot my password. I can't access Fedlog because the base IT moved the drives. So I had to remap the location so they could order parts again. My PC is messed up and won't do X, so I'd fix it or swap it out. If I swapped it, I had a bank set up with a keyboard bank, so I could use one mouse and keyboard for up to 24 PCs. I'd wait to build up at least 5 and reinstall Windows on all of them at once. I had to delete them from the squadron's account online. Then add them again after the RIS so the network would recognize them and allow it on them. I'd usually do remote work while I did this. At the end of the week, the first SGT checked the sheet during the weekly squadron commander's briefing, which was another job for me, putting together the slides for the briefing, which involved embedding an Excel document for performance reports in it. Another document I managed since no one else wanted to. I was waiting with giddy excitement. I knew what it was going to show. The other IMs had around 100 jobs each. Processed X decoration award. Process X number of performance reports, just paperwork stuff like that. Then comes my slide. I had over 650 jobs that week. I was all over every work site. There are lots of issues with the PCs. They take some big abuse from the maintenance guys. A lot of it is because most of them suck with computers and screw stuff up. One guy had 3 of those malware search bar things installed somehow and couldn't understand why it was an issue. The first SGT announced Monday morning that we were ditching the job tracking and no longer had to do it. I guess the maintenance group commander must have changed his mind in 1 week. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. This took place about 3 years ago, when I, 19F, was living in a one-bedroom apartment on campus. My building was not campus housing but still really close to schools which averaged 22,000 students every year. It had a few apartments and was designed like this. First floor was the entrance and the apartment of entitled Son No. 1, ES1. Second floor was my apartment above the entrance, and entitled Son-2, ES2, above ES1. Both sons were about 40 years old, and their mother, M, who was about 60 years old, was living with ES2. I later had confirmation by building management that she was not supposed to live here. This building was old, so not well soundproofed. To add to that, our 2 apartments on the second floor were once one apartment that was separated with a thin partition between my kitchen and M's bedroom. Before that day, I had received notes in my mailbox or visits from M saying that I was too loud. She told me that my washing machine was too loud, so I was careful not to do laundry before 9 a.m. or after 8 p.m. She told me my door was disturbing her, so every time I closed it I used my key to turn the lock instead of pushing it and making noise. One day, I was in my kitchen talking with a friend at 1 a.m. when we heard a knock on the wall. We had obviously woken her up, so we moved the chat to my bedroom, away from her to not disturb her. During the year I lived there, I only had people over once for half an hour between 8 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., and she wasn't even there for half of it. All I want to say is, I could have been a much worse neighbor to her. I was apologizing to everything and trying to accommodate her the best I could in a crappy building. The story. I was on my way to class when M and ES2 were going up the stairs to their apartment. My back was turned to them as I was locking my door, when suddenly M grabs my shoulder, turns me around and shoves me against my door, the big metal handle right on my spine. M yelling, "Hey, can we sleep in the morning here?" Me. Yes. M still yelling, "Stop treating me like I'm stupid, stop screwing with me. I know you're doing it on purpose. Every morning when you walk in your kitchen, you stomp to wake me up." Me. "I'm sorry, no, I'm not doing it on purpose." M. "I'm 60 years old. I am exhausted when I come home from work because I do a manual job 60 hours a week, so I need to sleep in the morning." She was coming home at 3:30 p.m. on a Thursday. Wasn't up at 7:30 a.m. when I was eating breakfast in my kitchen, but still managed to work 60 hours a week. Right. She kept yelling at me, saying that students are only here to annoy her, until her son screamed, "Next noise, you'll see what we'll do to you." I started crying and I left. The aftermath. I called my dad as soon as I got out of the building. I was speed walking as I knew they could see me from their window. My dad told me to go to the cops and file a complaint. On my way, I stopped by my school where there was an event, so friends of mine were in the hall and saw me in tears. One of them accompanied me to the police. I had to get a medical certificate in order to file the complaint, which explained that I was so afraid of her. I was eating on my bed instead of in my kitchen, and I recorded with my phone every time I was in the hallway to have proof if she ever decided to assault me again. That night I decided to not sleep there, so I picked up some clothes and my laptop, and a male friend went with me in case I ran into her again. I later got calls from the owner of the building and the management, apologizing and telling me that it wasn't the first time M had caused problems. We also received a letter saying that cameras had been installed in the hallways. In the end, I did not follow up and went to court, but she never bothered me again. So I guess that's a win. I'm 17 and live with my younger brother, 7, stepdad, and my mum. Last year, around June, my mum was diagnosed with a chronic illness that affects her ability to breathe and many other things. Sarcoidosis, if you're interested. At the time, this was a big shock and took a lot of getting used to. My mother's illness required me to help out a lot more and drop seeing my friends or enjoying my own free time. I was also going through a rough patch at this time. such as depression and severe iron deficiency, causing me to often feel tired or in some cases lethargic, leaving my room untidy and myself as well. Despite my own problems, I realized that she was clearly in a worse state than I was, often bound to the couch or bed for hours a day, unable to work. With my mother unable to work and my stepdad working full-time, I took on the majority of household chores and a long list of other tasks. This took a big toll on me, leaving me physically and mentally exhausted as it consumed a lot of time and energy, especially while trying to balance my exams. I ended up missing a lot of school and struggling to stay awake during the day. This routine continued for a few months, during which I found myself turning to marijuana more often to cope. This was around Christmas, and while my mom's tasks were becoming more frequent, she noticed I was struggling and reduced some of my responsibilities, which helped a lot until January. Around this time, she began asking for more help again, as she had been diagnosed with 2 more autoimmune diseases, and was constantly at hospitals and doctor's appointments, leaving me to manage the household. This pattern persisted, although I started to slack off a bit around February, when my nan began helping out once a week with cleaning, allowing me to focus on tidying up. Despite this, I still felt guilty because she's my mum, and I felt obligated to care for her, but I was overwhelmed doing it all alone. Around this time, many of my family members started calling me lazy and criticizing me for not putting in enough effort or caring enough for my mum. This angered me, but due to my depression at the time, I chose to ignore their comments. Things worsened as I began missing weeks of college and spending days in bed with a messy room, neglecting household chores. Despite this, I continued to help my mum and do cleaning, but I still received complaints about being lazy, which began to weigh heavily on my mind. Eventually, I snapped and lashed out at everyone one day. I told them that I've done more for my mum than anyone else in the family while juggling my exams, and that I have no free time to hang out with friends or do what I want. I spent most of my time indoors, afraid that something might happen if I were away. Unfortunately, they didn't take this well and dismissed me, so I declared that if they thought I was lazy and did nothing, then I wouldn't either, and they could see what happens. And that's exactly what I did for a whole 2 weeks. I did nothing. I went out and did what I wanted, and it felt liberating. I stopped smoking and focused on myself during those 2 weeks, which ended up lasting 4. After this time, they approached me and acknowledged that they needed my help because the house was falling into disarray. However, part of me wants to continue ignoring their demands and only do a minimal amount because I'm scared I'm wasting my teenage years. But it was just me and my mum until I was 7, so I feel a huge responsibility to take care of her. She seems to expect all my time to be dedicated to her, and I can't fulfill that. Any advice would be appreciated. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.